Hello and welcome to another episode of Transformational Blueprints, where we try to put a dent in the large number of transformation programs that fail. Hosted by me, Mario Michaels, founder and director of Synaxia Group. On this series, we will bring you unique insights drawn from first-hand experience from some of the most high-profile architecture and transformation leaders across the globe. Topics told in order to share knowledge, experiences and ideas to inspire, innovate and give back to the architecture community. So grab a coffee, sit back and relax. Welcome everybody. Welcome back after a summer break, and what a great first episode we've got today on the Transformational Blueprint podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Ali-Reza Moschtaghi, about delivering change at pace. Now, just as a real high level introduction, Ali-Reza is currently the chief architect at Merlin Entertainments. He's a career interim chief architect, so he's used to going in, delivering digital transformations from an architecture perspective at pace, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to the show, Ali-Reza.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Good. So if we could just start with a brief sort of introduction of yourself, Ali-Reza. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are.
Right, so yeah, Ali-Reza. So I've served currently, as you said, as the chief architect for Merlin Entertainments. I've been doing this for other organizations before, whether in interim or as permanent. I have 23 years of experience in technology leadership, and as part of that, have had quite a privilege to kind of go across different industries, but also different countries. So I've been doing, traveled quite a lot in my life, lived in a lot of different countries. My background, born and raised in Germany with Persian or Iranian roots, currently living in London, central London, but I worked in the US, I worked and lived in Mexico, India, Spain, and so on and so on. So yeah.
Wow, great mix there. And just to give us some sort of, I suppose, context, what does architecture at Merlin Entertainments currently look like in terms of the team and your sort of remit to go in there?
Yeah, so I mean, my expertise as part of digital transformations, is digital transformations core, right? And my background is enterprise architecture and IT strategy. I'm kind of known for my hands-on kind of approach to architecture rather than just the theoretical piece, kind of combining strategic kind of visioning and direction setting with practical delivery. And I've kind of been instrumental in kind of reshaping quite some complex IT landscapes over the years, right? In big companies like Merlin Entertainments, Costa, Bupa, we mentioned, and so on and so on, which all kind of with a focus of resulting in kind of cost reductions, enhanced scalability, overall improvements of the performance. Yeah, that's the idea, right? So, and I do this by interacting and managing kind of relationships on various levels, right? So at engineering, solution architecture, technical architecture level, all the way to kind of board level executives that have kind of need to be influenced around that. So architecture in this kind of context, what makes a kind of good architect, I guess the question is part of this podcast always is, unfortunately, there's not one single answer to this. It's kind of a multifaceted kind of, you need to kind of be able to do very different things in a really good manner. And I think the starting point for any good architect is you need to understand the business really, really well. You need to understand, what takes, what is the core of the business, what are the key challenges that they have there, not from a technology perspective, but from a business perspective, where are the opportunities in there, and then as part of that, be able to take very complex kind of technological things, let's call them, or problems, and be able to articulate them in very simple layman's terms to your stakeholders. And if they're board members, obviously, they don't need to know all the detail, but they need to know just the right detail in the right way to be able to make the right decisions. So I think these are the kind of core. So the IT business partnering piece is a very crucial part of this of architect role, in my view. At the same time, being very pragmatic, as I said before, and the kind of key skills that you have being logical, rational, analytic, kind of, bring the facts together rather than opinions around that.
Okay. You've had quite an extensive career within IT architecture, from consultancy to, as you said, healthcare with Bupa, Costa, and Merlin, and many sort of large organizations. How has your diverse experience shaped your approach to digital transformation?
How is it? I think that approach to architecture and then digital transformation.
Yeah.
I think dealing with all these variables, all the ambiguity that you have in such a big digital transformation, where there's a lot of unknowns, because either you are part of the digital transformation where certain kind of business outcomes are not clearly defined yet, or certain decisions on certain tools or systems have not defined yet because you can't define them yet. So there's a lot of variables to be able to manage that and still be able to influence certain or make decisions on certain aspects that you can fix. I think it is a really important thing around that. Yeah.
Okay. Why? I mean, the statistic is unknown because 80% of statistics are made up. But Gartner, Forbes, and BCG have all stated, and this is obviously in their best interest. So let's use a bit of freedom with this one. But around about 82 to 84% of digital transformations fail. You've been around the block for a while. Why do you think that's the case?
I mean, to be honest with you, it is very simple things, but it's very difficult to get those simple things right. If I'm going to mention them to you, you're going to say, well, obviously, but so the first one would be probably, be very clear around the vision and make sure that everyone is fully understood where you want to go towards, right? So was bought into it and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
It's incredibly difficult to get that. You're going to go into organizations where you have a skills gap, you have, cultural alignments or shift needs that need to happen, right? Which are, your organizations have been working on organizations that have been 200 years old.
Yeah.
200 years is a long time, although obviously people have not been there for 200 years. Still, you can feel it in the ways of thinking that. And if they've done a pretty good job for 200 years, and it's very difficult to kind of convince them, obviously, to kind of change around that. But I think that clear vision, and that clear vision needs to not only, and I see it a lot of times where you got a new CIO or a CDO coming in, and they're very good in kind of selling it upwards, right? And selling it to the board or to the private equity companies, right? And then that bits to translate it down, and actually down to the engineers, and get the engineers on board, and the architects and the technical development teams, all that kind of stuff. That is the difficult part where it fails, because that's where they get the pushback, and because they know all the detail. So and I think the second thing I would say around that is customer. Now, especially the industries that I've been in lately, it's all about B2C. It's about Merlin Entertainments. It's about Legonance, Madame Tussauds. Costa is about coffee drinking. It's all about that, right? So it is really important to customer centricity. So, or Nando's, right? We as architects, right, or the entire technical thing, we had to go and actually work shifts in the restaurants, right, to really understand how it is to be in the front line, what it is, what problems are there with the customers, right? Only then, it's always very easy to say, well, customer centricity, it's good for a customer, right? And you really need to go feel it a bit around that.
Okay. So on that then, so give us an example of what you saw when you worked a shift at Nando's, to then translate that into some form of transformation or some form of change in technology to benefit that customer. Because that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you about my first shift in Nando's, but that probably applies also when in Costa and some of the other ones, right? So, one of the particular systems that you get involved in, obviously, in a hospitality system is a point of sale system, right?
Yep.
So I had the privilege to work on my first shift, and I don't come from a restaurant background. I all my summer jobs that I did as a student were not in the hospitality business, were somewhere else, more manufacturing type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Also hard, but different. So I'm not, I don't have experience there. So I had to work on a Friday at Victoria Station at rush hour. And I walked into the door and I thought, oh, great, I work in technology. So first thing I'm going to do, obviously, is work at the till. And I stood at the till, and boy, I could not operate that till. It was way too complex, the UI. Way too complex. Impossible. So basically, so I mean, the point of sale to go and find all those kind of options, all those discounts, all those kind of things, right? I think we had not thought about that way, because we looked at point of sale, okay, fine, how's it set up, and so on and so on.
Rather than the actual user experience. And in this case, the customer wasn't the actual customer. The customer was the staff, wasn't it? Because it's up to them. That they're the ones using it all day, every day. And you need to make their lives easier so they can serve more customers because they're getting through the queues a lot quicker.
Well, exactly. Right. It's both, right? It's that poor person that was me, and then you have a queue going outside, which is the customer impacted because they have to wait for it because the guy cannot operate that till as quickly as they should. Yeah. Which brings you to the point is, what do you actually need tills? Which is another discussion.
Well, okay. So as a interim chief architect, you're paid a day rate, and everybody's sort of fully aware of about how that works. But you've got a target on your head, and your target is, are we getting a return on investment on today or this week or this month? It's not a permanent salary. Everybody's got to deliver change, whether you're permanent or interim, but you've kind of got to do it a lot quicker because they're paying you, as I said, on a day rate. So how do you go into an organization and get under the hood of it quickly, understand the key challenges, and then overcome them really, really quickly? Because you don't probably have the same amount of time as a permanent chief architect or head of architecture might have. You've got to demonstrate value pretty much from day one. How do you do that?
Yeah, it is. So I think my first couple of weeks on the job are usually it's not hectic right now, but they're kind of the toughest ones, right? Because you come into an organization, you need to parachute in an organization, and you need to show value very quickly. And in order to really show value very quickly, it's not about you coming from and bringing only external knowledge to this. That helps, right? But you need to actually contextualize that, and that context and that background of that organization and that sector. That is that stuff that you need to pretty much in 2 or 3 weeks you need to get that. Right.
Okay.
And the majority of organizations I've been in, those are not in the documents or in documents they're going to send you. So the only place you're going to find them is in the heads of the people. So I operate the kind of things like the first 2 or 3 weeks, my calendar has 30-minute slots. And I, as an architect, I always say I have the kind of luxury or the opportunity to go and actually sniff into any project or anything that's out there, right? You have the permission kind of to do as a chief architect. So I basically go around and meet as many people as possible, as many projects as possible, and just understand what are they doing, what are the challenges. Of course, talk to the business people, but I mean, literally, I would meet kind of 15, 20 people per day. Okay. Just slots. 15, 20-minute slots, bam, 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 to really understand from them where the problems are, what the context are, what the background, why they're doing certain things in this way and that. I think once you have a certain kind of base foundation knowledge, that's absolutely, and I see a lot of people come into organizations and don't spend the first 2 or 3 weeks do that. Okay.
Well, what type of people are you meeting across the organization? Level, job roles?
All of them. That's the key around this, right? Of course, you come in, you're going to meet the chief execs around that, and they're going to tell you, oh, how bad it is and why not. And then I find it all very interesting, right? And I kind of write it down and note that and say, oh, interesting. Okay, now I go kind of 5 levels below and go to that particular project that exec has talked about and to the developer, and I'm trying to find out where the challenges are there, right? Okay. So I do, and to get a very balanced view of it, because as we all know, it's not as simple as the exec think. There is underlying issues there, and those people on the line at the engineers and lower level guys, right, that've been around, and I've been lucky enough to work in some of the organizations where I go, and there are people in the organization for 25 years,
Yeah.
right? You just need to find those people, know exactly what they know, because they're, and then almost in my head, I'm almost have this kind of map around there. And I say, okay, if I want to ask for something in this segment for this solution, okay, I go there. And that is absolutely crucial for later on when it's then, they usually give you at least 3 or 4 weeks to kind of, honeymoon phase, right?
Yeah.
But then it comes, you got to go in, be parachuted to a meeting with exec and say, okay, are we going to go for this solution or not? You need to have some background for that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And then what? So you've met people, you've understood the blockages, the challenges, the sentiment across the organization on various different projects. Then what?
I think then it gives you kind of a view on what I said before, right? So you kind of understand where the fundamental issues and problems are and why things are like they are, right?
Yeah.
And you hear all kinds of stuff, right? It's like, oh, architecture has not been sitting at the top table. Nobody comes to me and asks for it. They all do their own thing. Now it's like, well, and there's many reasons for that, right?
Yeah.
Or we didn't have enough money. Cost, I hear it all the time, and then you actually in reality go in there and say, I don't think cost is the issue. You're actually bleeding money in this project here. You just don't know about it, right? I think there's kind of all kinds of standard architecture type of stuff that you could do, like a business capability map, target architecture, all that kind of stuff. I think it's an interesting topic, right? Because you have a lot of architects and they have TOGAF and have done all that good things, and there's the school book answer to do stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of my colleagues, I think, or some of my colleagues, not a lot, hopefully, are in the space of architects are just to produce documents, nice pictures, and the majority of people that actually look at the documents are actually themselves, rather than the people. And, I came up, I think, with this phrase of, I think we used to call it in Costa, it was like, just enough architecture, something like that, just enough, which basically means is it doesn't really matter, right? I'm sure in my career at some stage I've done it also and kind of say, this is a school book, let me do this. And I'm like, but that didn't really hit the mark. And this is why, as an interim, right, they're not going to pay me because I've created nice architecture diagrams. They pay me because I have achieved a certain outcome. I've helped them with the business problem of, all right, we need to make a decision on this tool. We have an acquisition. What are we going to put in there? Are we going to put a legacy system or not? So if I can do that in one single slide, I'm exaggerating a bit, right? And it just hits the spot, right? And that's it. That's the design. That's the design, right? It's the high-level design, conceptual design. So I don't have a preset of documents or things that I usually do, because it really depends on the context of the customer, of the client, and what is already available or not.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. And this is where I believe the stigma of ivory hour architect came from. People that just sit quite high up, put the designs together, don't really get into the detail, and so on and so forth. Now, I think enterprise architecture in particular has a bit of an identity crisis. So how crucial do you believe enterprise architecture is in driving digital transformation? Firstly,
I mean, obviously, it's very important, right? I mean, it's the bridge between effectively the business objectives of the digital transformation and translating that into technology, right? Whatever needs to happen in technology space, all the way down to the solution architects and developers and so on and so on. We also provide, and this is another word people don't like, governance, right? And the standards around that, right? Now, governance a lot of times, as you know, gets mistreated as, well, we are the police, and we're nothing. That's not, that doesn't have to be governance like that, right? It needs to be pragmatic, right? Balanced around that and helping them. And it's more around, once I get into an organization, right, maybe the first 1 or 2 months, right, I need to go and stick my head into the programs. But usually after the second or third month, I don't get involved. I don't have to do that anymore. They come to me. It's not anymore the push.
Yeah.
It's a pull. They pull me into it. They want me, because when you go into these situations, you want to be not a blocker. You want to be an accelerator. An architect should be an accelerator, not a blocker. You should be able to go in there and say, you know what? You're taking solution X. Fine. You could do a solution X, but I can give you a solution Y, but that will be cheaper and faster. That's how you're going to win their hearts and their trust. And if you do that once, believe me, they're going to come back. And even if the second, when they come back, you're not always going to be able to do cheaper and faster. It's not possible, right? Just because you've established that trust as in the first, to your point, you get parachuted in as a day interim, you need to do those. And that's where I pick, right, a good case where I can go and do something quicker and faster. And I say, hey, okay.
So you deliver the value early doors, or you basically get a quick win to get the buy-in. And then once you've got that buy-in, then you're then able to then go and deliver something larger, something slower, or whatever it may be, a bit more challenging. I suppose you mentioned it right at the beginning around one of the reasons transformation programs fail is because what the exec want often is different to what the people actually delivering it is or want. So how do you, and the role of the architect, as you said, is an IT business partner. It's speaking to technologists and relaying or dumbing it down in layman's terms to the board, and vice versa, getting that layman's term from the board and going, actually, this is what. How do you overcome that blockage when you get in really low level into engineering to inspire, motivate? I don't know whether that's the right word, but just get them on board, because ultimately it's people and process and then technology, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one. I think the majority, with some exceptions, right? The people, the engineers and the developers, or even the solution architects or technology architects, they are less the issue. Those are the people, remember, that felt over the years, when you go into the ocean, left in the engine rooms, and nobody listens to them. And they almost kind of get frustrated. It's like, oh, I actually know, but nobody really listens to me. Nobody cares about me. I'm 5 levels down. Now you have somebody coming in and saying, hey, I've talked to a chief exec, right? So now you have an automatic line to the chief exec. And now, all right, so tell me, Mr. or Mrs. So they actually quite open. I mean, the exceptions, right? Quite open. Because that's where there's a bit of purpose in there doing all of a sudden, right? It's like, oh my God, I can influence now. Every architect, any developer wants to influence, their area a bit, right? And they have not been able to, because they've been kind of order takers a lot. It's like, just produce a design for this. Somebody else made the decision already on tool X. The business usually does the decision. And now I go back and say, hey, do you think this tool is the right tool? And they all come back and say, no, they're very open. It's like, well, yes, no, and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah.
Okay. So then we get into sort of areas of, and I think this is one of the biggest things around at the moment. Obviously, everyone's talking about AI, right? But I think if we just forget AI as itself and just talk about innovation and the difficulty of, the C-suite or the owners of the business hearing what's going on in the news, and in this particular case it's AI, and coming to what are we doing about AI, why are we not doing it? So how do you drive innovation and balance that with risk, obviously, because it needs to be secure and whatnot, in an organization, as you put it, whereby there might be some resistance to change because the organization's 200 years old, and not, as you said, the people aren't necessarily 200 years old, but it gets passed down, and naturally there is going to be this mentality of we are a bit resistant. How do you go in and just change that, and quickly, because you've got to do it quickly?
Yeah, I mean, there's no silver bullet to it, right? It's slow. It is difficult. And I mean, there's simple things like you need to start to kind of shift the culture, right? You need to start showing them a bit the art of the possible, right? You could work with vendors around that. You can work with startups around that, right? You can maybe bring some case studies from some competitors in that space to kind of push them a bit in that space. But I think, again, I'm almost kind of, I don't believe that taking a certain technology and pushing it into the organization is ever the right thing. And never successful in my view, right? Whether it's AI or cloud or whatever, RPA or whatever shape format it is, right? So I would personally never go and say to chief exec, well, hey, let's use AI. No. I think it is, you look at all the context and all the problems that they have, and there's always, for me, a traditional way to address that problem, which is whatever the solution is, right? A software platform or building yourself or whatever, right? And then there is a more modern, more disruptive way to do that. That has, some of them, depending on how mature they are, have more risk, some of them less risk, right? So you can articulate those risks around that, right?
Sure.
And together with the business, get them on the same boat and say, you know what, we can. So for me, it's always the storytelling, right, of these slides. I mean, my life is in slides, right? Like a lot of people, right? But it is, how do you get them on board and say, you know what, very logically, you could do option 1, this is what the outcome is. You can do option 2, this is the outcome. Option 3, this is more innovative, more risky, but has these pros and cons. Let them decide. But the way you obviously set up these options, you can influence, right?
Okay. Now, another reason digital transformations fail, according to everybody that's been on this podcast and every IT leader that I speak to, is they're long transformation programs, and by the time you've started and delivered it, technology's changed. So technological advancements are changing at a rapid pace. From an architecture perspective, how do you future-proof designs or technologies, and do you in particular have any sort of criteria or ways to evaluate emerging technologies before going ahead and implementing them, other than, is this right for the business?
I mean, there's obviously all kinds of external providers that assess those technologies, right? The Gartner kind of, and others that have that. I mean, besides that, I think I've never been a fan of these big 3, 4, 5 years kind of programs, right? Because in my career, I have seldom seen any of them be successful. So I think it's all about changing the approach and being much more iterative around that, and thinking more, okay, fine, you can have your vision, 5 years vision or 3 years vision, right? But I think break that up into chunks and think about, what are we going to do in the next 3 or 6 months? And based on that, then pick the technology and the designs around that, right? Because I cannot tell you, I mean, whether it's innovation or not, right? Even if I go and talk about really old type of, ERP type of implementations, right? Which is something that we're doing right now, for example. So ERP, well, you're sitting there in a room and it's like, well, in 3 years' time or 4 years' time, once we've implemented these countries, we're going to do countries X, Y, and Z with the same tool, whether it's NetSuite, Business Central. And I'm like thinking to myself, well, I guarantee you in 4 years' time, Microsoft or Oracle or anybody else have a new product, right? So this is, so either you kind of not plan for it at all, right? At least to that detail on the technology, or you need to do something that you accelerate your delivery significantly and make it more iteratively. And that goes more into the approach and into, I don't want to use the word agility, but there's a very different way of how we used to implement and saying, hey, here's a big program, here's projects, and gonna do it, and say, as is assessment, here's a to be, let's do the transition ban, it's going to take 12 months to actually design it. Right. I think we're away from that. I think we're more into, okay, well, let's just carve something out quickly, not bother about as is at all. Why? Well, who cares about as is? We know as is already bad. So why don't you document them, right? Just use plain vanilla, what is already in the tool, right? And just implement it in 3 or 4 months. And I've done this in my career several times, right? I've been implementing an ERP solution in China in 3 months' time, right? Done.
Yeah.
What do? We went there to the exec, say, you know what? We can do that. No bells and whistles, plain vanilla, no customizations. We can do it in 3 months.
Yeah. Okay. But then what? Does it not need customizations after, once it's bedded in?
Well, but the customizations after that, those become then a business case decision, right?
Yeah.
Whether the business really, really needs them rather than doing them up front. Of course, some customizations you need, right?
Yeah.
But they are consciously decided with the business saying, hey, if you're going to do that, you're going to incur X cost and that's going to increase your timeline. Some customizations, yes. But I think the other way around to just say, hey, here's tell me what your wish list is. Let me find what you want. No.
Yeah.
Not going to work.
Okay. So we'll get a lot of listeners, and I speak to a lot of people who this is their first gig as a chief architect or a head of architecture, or head of whatever the job title, number one in architecture, often reporting into the CIO, COO, whoever it is. I suppose it doesn't matter. So yeah, thanks for that, Ali-Reza. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us something specific that you've done within a transformation program, or something you've come across which you think is quite innovative in the architecture realm then.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, as architects, part of digital transformation, you are responsible for setting the technology direction, right? As part of that, you set the architecture, the target architecture. Now, we know there is different types of architecture diagrams that you could produce.
Yep.
And some of them are way too detailed for or too technical for the business audience. So how are you going to get the right level? And I think that's the art of an architect to do that, right? Just because if it's too high level, it doesn't give you the information. So I think there's this new kind of terminology that we're using, or I haven't coined it, but it's called marketecture. So it's a combination of the word marketing and architecture, as opposed to tech. I think it's techitecture. Sorry, it's very different. So technical architecture, which is the stuff that we usually do, the very detailed technical diagrams, right? The marketecture is something you could put in front of the business, and on one slide they fully understand it, right? It's colorful, all that kind of stuff, but has enough detail to be able to drive the right decisions, right? So it's about looking at things like, in a certain business division, right? Whether it's finance or it's operations and park, right? It will show you all the different technology products that you have, the platforms that you have, right? It's that domain finance, or as I said before, and has the capabilities also on there. And based on that, then you can drive decisions on, okay, what's the health of those technology products? How does that fit together? How much do I pay for it? How much revenue do they generate right now? So really key metrics from a business perspective that are important, rather than, the spaghetti diagrams that we usually have.
So if that sounds really simple. So if something so simple has so much impact, why is everyone not doing it? Why have we got to a point where we're delivering diagrams of 20 slides or whatever it is, and over convoluted and complicated, when it can be something as simple as implementing a new finance system or whatever it is, ERP, whatever. Here's why. Here's the metrics that we're going to monitor it against. One slide. Thank you very much. This is how we do it. Why haven't architects done this for 20 years if it is so simple?
I think it's a good question, right? I think technology is very complex. It becomes more complex. I think the architects are very smart people.
Yep.
Usually, right?
Usually,
and they live in complexity, right? And I think that's the point was trying to say, articulating it. I think it is a key skill of an architect to take very complex things, condense them into the most important things in a simplified form, right? And then there's no, I can't give you advice how to do it, right? It is just comes from experience, right? And
of course.
That is the key thing you need to do. And sometimes it's just like a slide with 3 boxes on it or 4 boxes on it, right?
Yeah.
But just the right ones in the right constellation and right form, right? To actually make those points. Why we're not doing that? I think we're just living in that engine room for too long. We just need to get more out to the business. The business doesn't look at that. They don't care about that. You need to have that, right? Don't misunderstand me, right? This is not to kind of saying, hey, scrap all that kind of stuff, because that's going to cause you issues also, right? You need to kind of take, it's kind of a bit of a hierarchy. You have like an iceberg. The iceberg on the top is this architecture stuff, right? But it has a lot of detail under it, because once you made a decision, then the detail under it, you need that for the delivery teams to be able to deliver. So you need to understand the complexity on the low level, on the tech, on the complex diagrams first, to then derive the high level architecture diagram. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Okay. So what sort of stuff would that architecture diagram have then? You've mentioned that if it was a finance system, it would be ROI, it will be sales, it will be et cetera, money coming in, money coming out, I can imagine. Give us an example specifically of what else ERP, that's one of your specialisms, right? I think you've delivered many ERP programs of work. Architecture diagram for ERP system, what would it look like?
You wouldn't do one for ERP. So you would have, for finance, you would have on one side, you would have financial accounting systems as the kind of maybe the platform, right? So there'll be a portfolio of ERP systems. Usually in a lot of organizations, I've been in, there's multiple ERPs. The ERP, whether that's NetSuite, Business Central, Sage, or whatever legacy you have, those are individual kind of technology products. And then under it, they have the capability, where the capabilities like, I don't know, records to report, O2C, purchase to pay, those kind of things, right? That's how you would show that, right?
Okay.
Now, you could take this diagram, and then you'll have obviously maybe 5 or 6 other kind of platforms in there also. So I don't know, performance management, for example, financial performance management, which is all the consolidation type of stuff that you do, financial forecasting, planning. That's another area in that, right? You would have, what we have is revenue recognition, right? So it's, in an organization like us, we have ticketing systems, we have online systems, we have hotel systems. There's revenue coming in, you need to take the revenue, you need to do some fancy calculations to recognize the revenue, you have deferred revenue, all that kind of stuff is in there. And then you have financial reporting also. Those are the kind of the pictures. And you have all the systems attached to that, the systems of the technology products attached to that, because we're moving very much into a product ways of thinking rather than a project kind of old school kind of thing. And then on top of that, you would have the health of each one of these kind of areas, right? You would do it maybe by portfolio area. So you would take all the ERPs and say, well, our total cost of ownership of all ERPs is X. Now, that's an interesting discussion to have, right? And say, hey, whoever's responsible for that area, to talk to the CFO around and saying, hey, we are spending currently, I don't know, 5% of our IT budget in this area. Is this the right thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
Or not?
Okay. If you were to hang your hat on the best transformation program you've done from a value perspective, what would it be?
Has to be the one I'm doing right now. I mean, the one we're doing right now, obviously that's not only myself, that there's a lot of people obviously involved. We have a CDO, we have a CTO, we have a CDO just started. The beauty of this, we have started this with the help of an external consultancy company who have actually calculated already what the business impact of a digital transformation would be. Down to the bottom line. Wow. It's a significant number, right? In the millions. Multiple digits of millions, right? And that has been already identified and accepted and baked into our planning, into the financial planning to the next years. So we need to deliver on that. So it is kind of, you said, hey, for example, a part of the digital transformation, specifically in this, we're obviously Merlin Entertainments, what we do in terms of Legoland and Milan Tussauds is will be on the guest transformation side, right? How we can improve our interactions with our guests, right?
Yep.
In that space. So it is, that is where the significance comes. And yeah, so.
Okay. You delivered a large ERP program. Can't remember who with, but I know we've had a brief discussion on it in the past. It'd be really interesting to talk a little bit about the details of that, not necessarily the names of the business, but the details of it. It was a NetSuite versus Business Central, wasn't it? Was NetSuite already in? Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this is not really to bash any of the vendors because or solutions at all, because
no,
you could
it's
take
based
the same
on
solution.
context, isn't it? Yeah, as you said earlier, it's based on context, isn't it? It's the context, the situation you're in, and the best solution for that context and that business.
If you have an organization that is not very prone for one size fits all, fully standardized financial processes run in one single instance, maybe a NetSuite kind of approach is not the most cost efficient approach.
Okay.
Right? Because there are other solutions like the Dynamics Business Central that are more prone and more focused on the a countrywide or region-wide kind of rollout.
Yeah.
Which still gives them a little bit of autonomy to adjust and localize where needed, but then allows them still a thin layer of kind of commonality across the board, or if you needed to, in terms of reporting out to group and so on and so on and so on. Now, taking that approach, if you can deliver the same outcome and I remember actually my slide around this is on the first slide in the executive summary is we can deliver at 50% less costs, right? And the costs were, I think, 6-7 million. So 50% of that to do the other option and to do it probably at almost half the time, just by the approach we took with the Business Central one. Again, this is not about Business Central versus NetSuite.
No.
It's I think how they are set up and what scenario they work best with. And if you as a chief architect in there and can go in front of the CFO and say, yeah, I can do this for several million cheaper, I think that's not a long discussion.
No, of course
discussion at all.
So why was your approach different then? What was so special about this approach that allowed you to save 50%? As you say, it's not the product per se, is it? Business Central versus NetSuite. What it sounds like it was the approach to it that allowed you to save that cost.
Well, I think the approach is the adapting and understanding the context and the business surrounding and the operating model. So if the organization doesn't want to go to a global operating model and one size fits all, which in my view is difficult anyway, right? For many, right? Even if you have them countries or China, which is always an island, right? So you could always chase this utopia of, yes, I can take one single system and roll it out globally and everyone needs to follow the standard processes. Yeah, you can do that. Definitely not the cheapest option, I can tell you that. Right? Especially in an organization which historically, and this is where the context comes in, historically have been over the last 20, 30 years, right, have been able to make locally their own decisions and currently have all separate ERP systems to actually shift them, right, from where they are right now to a one size fits all. Just requires significant, it's so difficult in terms of culture shift, right, and transformation to do that. Whereas, okay, you're all going to be using the same platform, right? At least it's Microsoft, right?
Yep.
Right. We can have some synergy discussions around it. You shouldn't maybe all set up different customers and so on and so on. But you then have on a local level the right to do certain localizations and customizations that are needed for your local authorities because you have different tax regimes and different kind of regulatory requirements that you do. So give them still a bit of an autonomy to do so rather than this command and control kind of approach. So that's why it was different. and of course then significantly cheaper. But again, as an architect, I was not really. You have to be very agnostic around these things, right? It is all about, right, to lay down the options in a very clear way, right? And say, hey, we can do this one NetSuite. It's going to cost this. It's going to that. This is the outcome. You're going to have a fully, standardized globally processes. It's going to be very difficult. We need to hire a lot of change managers. We need to do this, or we can do this.
Yep. Take your pick. As you say, you've got to be agnostic with that. And I think over the past 7 years, I purely from a talent perspective, I speak to hundreds of architects. And with the rise of SaaS and businesses pivoting to becoming more product-led and technological-focused businesses and startups and scale-ups and so on, we found that the solution architect that is now has come from mainly software and mainly one language. So they've been a .NET developer or engineer and then become a tech lead. And then, right, I don't want to manage people. I'm going to become a solution architect or software architect to solution architect. And fundamentally, the problem you've got with that is and where they struggle a lot, and a lot of them go back into engineering, is because they don't have that ability to become tech agnostic. They don't have the ability to go and speak to the wider business, the customers and so on, and say, actually, this isn't a .NET solution. This is whatever. We don't need to do a whole new replatforming. It's just a case of go and get this from over here or whatever it may be. And I think architecture as a practice or as an industry over the past 6-7 years has taken a bit of a hit because of that. So yeah, really, really interesting points. Really interesting points. If you were going into a role as a chief architect, what would your first 90 days have to look like for you to be able to deliver value? And I say that because, again, just like enterprise architecture at the moment in general has a bit of an identity crisis for not the big banks and the governments. Everybody values architecture because they've always had them for decades. But the SMEs or the scale ups whereby, they've potentially built a SaaS platform, it's creaking, and they need to be able to build something that's scalable, for example. How can the chief architect demonstrate value to go and be given the budget to go and build an architecture practice from day dot? What advice can you give to someone to, as you said, rather than push architecture on the business, get the business to come to them?
Yeah, I don't think, again, there's an easy answer to that question.
I appreciate
think
it depends on what the situation is. Yeah, of course.
And the situation, so that you need to really, but I think that's key, right? I think adapt your approach to the situation, which some people don't do because they use the same approach they might have used before and said, hey, this is how the approach is. So it really depends on the context of the situation. If I go into an organization, right, and I've been in organizations where it's a cost-cutting mode, right?
Yeah.
It's very difficult in that situation to kind of say, well, can I get a couple of million to set up an architecture practice?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Not going to work, right? So you just have to bite the bullet and add value somewhere else. And it is, you need to find your places where you can add value. And sometimes that needs to, the good thing about architecture is very broad.
Yeah.
Right? That's very good in some way, right? Because if you, as an enterprise architect, you're not restricted to any technologies, any domains, or anything, right?
Yeah.
So you could literally just go around. That's what I do as part of the sessions that I talked about, right? You could just go around and just ask them the question of, where does technology cause you problems?
Yeah.
And sometimes you might get really trivial answers and say, well, my mobile phone doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. But as silly as that is, right? If that's with two execs and they have the same problem, well, maybe then you need to look at that, or it's then becomes service management or operations that there's an issue there, right? And I will dig into that area. But I think you need to very quickly, and there will be always issues. You know that.
Yeah.
You need to find the biggest issue, establish yourself. Once you've established yourself, you can then ask for additional resources and build that. But I have not seen it in my, remember, I get into situations that I get into are slightly different maybe than the normal permanent ones, right?
Yeah.
I get into situations where shit has hit the fan,
Hit the
right?
fan.
So
Yeah, and they need someone change right now. Let's get it turnaround specialist. Okay.
yeah.
So part of that, then you need a high performing team behind you. And you've already touched on how you go about identifying talent in terms of the skills that a good architect needs. How do you then lead or build a high performing team of architects, not engineers only, just good, well-rounded architects?
So I think, I mean, to back to that point, right? I think, I mean, the organizations that I go into, they usually don't have the architecture skills,
Yeah.
right? But architecture, to be a good architect, as I mentioned in the beginning, that there's different kind of skill sets you need to have. So usually they have one or two of those skill sets,
Yeah.
or just have context, right?
Yeah.
That's gold dust also, right? They have context,
Yeah.
and that's fine. And I think you just need to use them and help them kind of build the other skill sets that they don't have around that to do that, right? So
Okay.
I think, nevertheless, I mean, building high performance teams is about diverse skill sets.
Yeah.
You need to have deep technical expertise, but with some very good business acumen. I think communication and problem solving is a big area around that. I think empowering and giving those teams the autonomy to make decisions and be courageous enough to own certain parts, I think, are important. I personally am never, and that again comes maybe from my interim background, I'm not a big fan of hierarchies.
Yeah.
As an interim, and in my position, there's no hierarchies for me, right? It's just like I don't look at it and say, oh, this is a senior X and this is a junior Y, so I only talk to the senior person.
Yeah,
For
of course
me,
not.
I go after the knowledge and skill sets. So if I need to find an information about something,
Yeah.
a certain business process, a certain business division, a certain business problem or technology problem, that sits across the board. So to your point, I think it is not to build one single separated architecture team. I think it's more, for me, a community of practice. Architecture
Yeah.
is a community of practice.
Yeah.
So there might be people that not might be, it's very likely that you have people that don't have an architecture title. They
Yeah.
do something very different, but actually have those skill sets or
Yeah.
parts of those skill sets that I want to tap into. So in my role, I might have a team, a small team, right, that you want to build, right? But I rely on a community of people that I have
Yeah.
relationships with, right?
Yeah.
Because I know that person knows something or has a specific skill set that I need at a given point of time. And I'll
Yeah.
go to that person and pull
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
in for sometimes for solutioning even. That's
Yeah.
fine.
As you say, IT business partner. You don't see many businesses hire that role these days, but that makes a great talent pool for future architects. The ability to go out to the wider business and understand the challenges and come up with a technical or technological solution. Brilliant. And then obviously they then pass it on, but effectively that is the role of a solution architect, obviously without the design. So on that then, how do you see responsibilities changing for our IT architects across the board, whether that's solutions, data, whatever it may be, with the especially with the rise of things like automation, automated processes, AI-driven technologies, and how can architects prepare for it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mention it before, but I mean, one of the key things as an architect is joining the dots, right?
Yep.
Now, in the world that we're in right now, ecosystems and everything gets more and more complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's more and more. If you look back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the amount of applications or systems or anything that we had and technology or vendors that we worked with were much less. This trend, in my view, gets more and more. Hence, the role of the architect of joining the dots becomes even more important
Difficult.
and
Yeah,
even
yeah.
more difficult, right? So as an architect, it's integrating, joining those dots between the ecosystems, not only within the organization, but
Yeah.
also increasingly outside the organization, right? And if you work in some of the industries that I work in, you're talking about, franchisees, right, that have a
Yeah.
separate ecosystem around there. We need to think about that. You have vendors, you have, all kinds of partners in that landscape that you need to kind of pull these together.
Yeah.
I think AI will take a big role. We all know. I mean, everyone
Yeah.
talks about it, right? And kind of automating decision making, making smarter
Yeah.
decisions and so on and so on. And but as an architect in that role, you just have to always be in the forefront to kind of see and be kind of up to date with a lot of these technologies. There's a lot of hype, as we know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was cloud 10 years ago and everyone put just a cloud badge on top of everything they do.
Yeah.
Now it's AI. But I mean, as an architect, you see through that, right?
Yeah.
It's not an
You
AI.
should do. Yeah.
You
You should do.
right? So yeah.
Okay. Well, we're coming towards the end of our episode. We're going to jump into our quick fire questions. So the answers don't have to be quick fire. It's just quick. So what do you expect in 2024 will be a game changer from a technology perspective? You're not allowed to say AI.
Yeah, well, that's a problem, right? That's a problem. Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, everything. I mean, besides the old things that we know,
What's the hardest interview question you've either had or asked?
I had some very interesting interviews.
I can imagine.
Do you want to hear? This might be a bit longer one.
Go
not
for
too
it.
long,
Yeah,
but
no, we've
that's
got it. Yeah.
I'll ask you the question and then I'll tell you the context of it.
Okay.
Right? The question I've been asked in an interview. Mario, imagine you are in your house and you have a garden, and all of a sudden in your garden, an alien lands into your garden. Alien, as you would imagine, right? Green, as you would imagine them, right?
Yeah.
And that alien comes and knocks on your door and says, Mario, I'm coming from another universe. I'm here in 2 hours about to meet the world leaders, and I'm here to take over the world.
Okay.
And I want to influence them and to take over the world. What advice can you give me?
Okay. From a talent perspective, what's the biggest change you expect to see in the market over the next 5 years?
We all know that the new generations coming in, they have different needs and have different work ethics. We know
Yeah.
that, right? So that's going to significantly change. But I guess your question is around the architecture space. As I said before, right? I mean, I think that role or that discipline, I think, will become even more critical and more important. I think it is that relationship, that articulation, that communication skill sets that will become more important. That is going to be difficult to be placed by Gen AI or anything like that, right? I mean, to create a business capability model, right? I can go to ChatGPT and give them some hints around that, and ChatGPT can do that, right? That's not the art anymore, right? Or so, but that relationship, that stuff is the key, and how to articulate that's the key. As technologists,
strategy to execution, isn't it? Well, sadly, Ali-Reza, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for a great podcast episode. It's been really interesting speaking with you and chatting with you in detail about how chief architects can deliver change at pace. So, yeah, once again, thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I hope our listeners enjoy it just as much as I did.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And that's a wrap. Sadly, we're at the end of another Transformational Blueprints episode. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and there were plenty of golden nuggets for you to take away. If you're a fan of the show, please do remember to share, like and leave reviews so that more people from our industry get to hear and benefit from these too. Please also follow Synactia Group on LinkedIn to keep up to date with new episodes. links in the show notes. Join us next time for another episode packed with tips and advice from senior leaders in the technology world.